Good afternoon, everyone. This is Tuesday, March 12th, and this is the Revenue Subcommittee of Ways and Means. I know today's schedule has already shifted quite a bit, but we are going to try to move quickly through a few bills and then get into discussion on a few bills. Starting off with House Bill 306. This House Bill 306 proposes establishing the Independent Innovation Agency of Prince George's County to promote innovation and technology in the county. We do have amendment, strike the bill and establish a work group on independent innovation in Prince George's County to study and make recommendations regarding an Entrepreneurs in Residence pilot program in TEDCO and strategies to establish the county as a hub for certain companies. Any discussion or questions on that amendment? Delegate Buckle.
So all it's going to do, it's going to eliminate the fiscal note and funding, and it's going to create a work group to allow Prince George's County and state stakeholders to explore ways to do this particular initiative, which sounds like a great initiative, but it takes out all the fiscal value of it and the state funding part for right now.
That's correct.
Thank you. That sounds fine.
Can be staffed with existing resources.
Okay, thank you.
Was that your question to Delegate Block-Switch card? Okay. Okay. All right. Is there a motion on the amendments?
Move favorable.
Second.
Okay, on the amendments, all in favor, please raise your hand. Okay, any opposed? Wonderful. Is there a motion on the bill as amended?
All favorable.
Second.
Wonderful. It's been properly moved and seconded. Any additional questions, final comments? Seeing none, all those in favor of House Bill 306 as amended, please raise your hand. All right, that looks like everyone. Wonderful. House Bill 306 is moving out with a favorable recommendation. All right, we are going to jump to House Bill 1068. This is was a tax return checkoff bill for folks to register for organ donation. But we do have two amendments. The amendments require that the comptroller implement procedures to offer electronic income tax return filers the opportunity to register to make an anatomical gift through a hyperlink to the donor registry, and it applies to tax year 24 and beyond. So basically, the tax checkoff option is more cumbersome for the comptroller's office to implement. They weren't able to do that directly, but what we came up with as a compromise to help support the intent of giving more folks the opportunity to become organ donors is that on their electronic form, they'll simply provide a brief explanation and a link to the registry, so folks can go ahead and register directly there. Any questions or discussion? Is there a motion on the amendment?
Move favorable.
Second.
All right, it's been moved and seconded. On the amendments, all those in favor, please raise your hand. Any opposed? All right, we got everyone. Okay, then on the bill as amended, any additional comments, questions, discussion? Seeing none, is there a motion?
Move favorable.
Second.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded. All those in favor of House Bill 1068 as amended, please raise your hand. Beautiful. All right, that was everyone. So House Bill 1068 is moving out with a favorable recommendation. And I think, George, that wraps it up for you. So thank you. I know you've got a lot on your plate. Thanks for joining us. And we are shifting to the Stan Ward hour portion of the subcommittee
Stan!
meeting. Starting off with House Bill 455. So this is the comptroller's electronic tax and fee return filing requirements. So shifting different types of filings to be made electronically with various effective dates for different different components. And so we do have amendments, and the amendments are, and Stan, please, you can elaborate or correct, but mostly looking at adjusting some of those effective dates of when the different requirements for different types of returns to be filed electronically. And then we also added an amendment, which I had raised during the hearing, that once the requirement for individual filers to file electronically takes effect, then tax preparers or tax preparation software would not be able to charge an additional fee for electronic filing once that's the required way to go. Stan, did I miss anything we need to cover there?
I would just add there's a couple of additional exceptions to the electronic filing requirements that are added, including for individuals with disabilities, people who may have religious objections to the use of technology, or people who may have identity theft issues.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you. Yes, I forgot to mention those. Any questions, comments, discussion on the amendments? Do we have a motion on the amendments?
Move favorable.
All right, amendments have been moved and seconded. Any additional questions, comments? Seeing none, all those in favor, please raise your hand. Wonderful. Thank you. Now on the bill as amended. Any final discussion? If not, all those in favor of House Bill 455 as amended, please raise your hand. Wonderful. And that is moving on with a favorable recommendation. Oh, I'm sorry.
Madam Chair, I just want
Yes.
to apologize because I had lost my connection and been trying to get back on ever since. Thank you.
Okay, no worries. Thank you for coming back. You're just in time for some good discussion. So the remaining bills on the agenda today are for just for discussion purposes today. As we discussed last week in light of the budget outlook, including the latest write down that came out late last week. We are exploring all of the revenue options that were introduced. And so looking at House Bill 1072, this is increasing the sales and use tax on alcoholic beverages from 9% to 10%. Any questions, comments, discussion? Delegate Hartman.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Do you know, like if someone goes out of the state to purchase alcohol, how many bottles they can legally purchase and move? Is that something Stan can answer?
I'm sorry, I didn't quite understand the
For
question.
personal use, if somebody went, Delaware is no state tax. So, for folks in my district, if we make things too overburdensome, it just comes to a limit where they say, you know what, I'm tired of it. I'm gonna go across the state line. And if you're driving into, our district, there's always advertisements, billboards, to the point where, 2 miles off of 50 or 3 miles off of 50, you'll be in Delaware and no tax alcohol. How many bottles of liquor can someone purchase in another state for personal consumption and bring over the line legally?
That's a great question. I don't know the answer, but I can
Okay.
definitely look into it for you.
Just expressing concern. If we make it too burdensome, Virginia, our state's pretty long and narrow in places, and it's a skip and a hop into another state. And, people are, I think, getting to the tipping point where if we force them out of state, then this could actually diminish what we're collecting and actually do more harm than good.
Okay.
I mean, one nice bottle of bourbon is almost worth a trip to Delaware at 10% savings.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Delegate Buckle.
So I just point out two things with this, obviously. I think I won't belabor Delegate Hartman's point that for much of the state, you're close to not just to go purchase at a liquor store, but also for dining, entertainment, might involve the purchase of an alcoholic beverage. I think at the end of the day, is the juice really worth the squeeze here? We raised the alcohol rate from 6% to 9%, not primarily as a revenue generator, because quite frankly, it didn't generate enough revenue, obviously, to make a difference in our spending estimates. We did it in an attempt to, the same way we talk about tobacco, to discourage use. So we did it in a way, I mean, this was backed by, I think, Mr. DeMarco and some of his advocates with the various health initiatives. Raising it from 9% to 10%, when you look at the fiscal note, what are we paying for with this? It's a $34 million a year estimated sales tax hike. And the sales tax, as we all know, is not progressive. It falls upon everybody, whether you're buying a, $10 six pack of the cheapest beer possible or, a $500 bottle of wine, the rate is the same. And we're not raising enough money to pay for anything that the committee and others have said we have to raise all this money to pay for. I mean, this is not a pay for unless you did 100 other things like this. Literally, it's not a pay for. And so I think that the juice is not worth the squeeze in the sense of the effect that it will have on our restaurants, on our retailers in this particular sector to bump up 1%, the negative competitive effect versus the revenue it would generate. We'd eat this revenue in a couple weeks, essentially, at our spending pattern, and what will we get for it? So I think the committee knows that myself and Delegate Hartman will probably oppose maybe not all, but certainly most of the revenue enhancement measures we've seen, taxes we've seen so far. But this one to me is not one of the ones that is best arguable to meet a purpose as juxtaposed to its effect.
Thank you. So it sounds like you'd rather see us pursue other revenue options.
My good friend from Howard County, what I would rather see us do. I'd rather see us be honest and say we can't afford all of the blueprint and we're going to have to find a way to get the most bang out of the buck for the dollars that we have. Identify the schools, the students, the programs, the teachers who we really need to take care of and focus on that instead of the big picture number.
Got it. Thank you, Delegate. Any other comments, questions, discussion on the proposed increase in the tax on alcoholic beverages? Okay. And then let's move along to House Bill 1073. This is increasing the rate on cigarettes from $3.75 for a pack of 20 cigarettes to $4.50, and from 17.5 cents to 22.5 cents on each cigarette in a package of more than 20. Any questions, comments? Delegate Polakovich-Carr.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And I'll say, I think these comments actually, I could have said this on the last bill, so maybe I'll just apply it to both of these. I think on both of these bills, it isn't just about the money that is coming in, but really about dissuading, at least or discouraging for some people, habits that have other health effects for folks and have other societal costs. We know that smoking costs Marylanders through our health insurance, through Medicare, through Medicaid, a lot of money each year. Similarly, in terms of drinking, that DUIs, on-road crashes, et cetera, has a big societal cost. So, I'm certainly glad we're discussing both of these today. Thank you.
Thank you. Delegate Roberts.
On Delegate Polakovich Carr's comments, I'm just gonna say ditto. And with so I'm applying this to both. I'm just gonna say those tax bill, I want to say that, I mean, we're not as high as DC, and DC is making a killing off of it. I'd be open to both. Now, other tax bills, I'll have some reservations.
Okay. Thank you, Delegate. Delegate Hartman.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just saying, if we keep pushing these taxes, you might drive people to drink. On a serious note, again, my question: how many cigarettes can be moved across the state line? Are we going to force more people to look for other ways? I've never smoked a cigarette in my life. Truly, I'm not a fan of smoking. But at some point, when are we pushing people, to make decisions? And it's going to affect the poor people. And I hate to keep saying that, but somebody with a little bit of means that smokes can, on their way back on a trip, or can take a day trip somewhere, afford 8 or 10 packs, cartons, or whatever, cigarettes, whatever the legal limit is. If there's 2 or 3 people in the car, they can afford to skirt these issues. It's the poor people in Maryland that we're hurting.
And Delegate Hartman, I can answer the question about how many cartons. It's 5 cartons that you can legally take across state lines.
Okay, so I put 4 people in my car and we have a little road trip. 2 of the people don't smoke, but you have 2 people each picking up 10 packs of cigarettes, a heck of a lot cheaper than in Maryland. And it's going to happen. It's people only have so much disposable income. People are willing to suffer so much before we push people to other means. We heard from the comptroller for the first time since World War II, our population is decreasing. And, that tells you something. We can't keep doing the same thing and expect a different outcome. We got to look for different ways to do this. Thank you.
Thank you, Delegate. Delegate Buckle.
So I would kind of echo some of that in this sense. I've never smoked a cigarette in my life, nor have I vaped. I've lost people very close to me as a result of their addiction to cigarettes and the effects that it has, lung cancer. If there is ever would be a tax that I could be like, yeah, you can make an argument, this would probably be it. I think vaping also has a lot of problems. It's not something we should ever be encouraging people to do, because I think, to be frank, it's not something that can be done in moderation. The addictive qualities of it that differentiates it from alcohol. I think all of us know people in our lives that can safely enjoy 2 beers, 2 glasses of wine, not drive, have a drink occasionally, and it doesn't produce any deleterious effects. I don't know very many people that smoke just every once in a while, or vape, just every once in a while. My problem, and I just indicate this to you, as you all know, where I live is very close to West Virginia. I, at one point in time in my legal practice, represented a tobacco store less than a mile from the Maryland line across the Potomac River in West Virginia. I represented them in some litigation, required the production of some information. It's been a very long time, 10, 15 years ago now, so it's not confidential or anything. They were the #1 tobacco retailer in the entire state of West Virginia in a county of 17,000 people. And the reason for that is they put a billboard on I-68 traversing Cumberland, less than a mile from their store. It wasn't because everyone in Allegheny County was going there. We're not big enough to produce that kind of a result. It was because they were attracting tobacco consumers from an hour radius from, Hagerstown, Pennsylvania, north of us from the entire radius that would go to that store consistently. I mean, it was insane. I was shocked. I often thought to myself, I got in the wrong line of business, but I couldn't imagine selling tobacco for a living. And so I know that's not everywhere. I know that's not what's going to happen in Baltimore City, or no one's going to drive from Howard County to West Virginia to buy their cigarettes. But I do think it will affect your revenue calculations from the bill. And I would point out again, the revenue for this bill, even though I really believe in some of its underlying purposes, the revenue is not going to change what we're suggesting we're trying to do. If you're trying to raise $1 billion, $2 billion, $3 billion, $4 billion, you're not going to do it with these bills at all. So I'm not sure if the juice is worth the squeeze, but I do appreciate, I've told Delegate Barnes that I do think that tobacco and vaping is the one area where most of us can agree, we really don't want to encourage that behavior. So thank you for that consideration.
Okay, thank you. And speaking of vaping, we have Delegate Fair joining us as a special guest in the Revenue Subcommittee today. And that's sort of a good segue into House Bill 1414, which we wanted to include for discussion purposes, specifically to look at the components that dealt with the tax rate on electronic smoking devices, as we have this conversation around taxing cigarettes, to make sure we're looking at electronic smoking devices as well. So Delegate Fair, since we didn't have a hearing on this bill, I know it was primary in ECM, and actually didn't have a hearing, but can you just real quickly explain the tax provisions for everyone?
Certainly. Thank you so much for the opportunity, Madam Chair, and I'm thrilled to be on a different committee to present to talk about this bill. But basically, the current tax rate is that for vaping liquid, that is nicotine-based liquid, that's less than 5 milliliters, it is currently taxed at 60%. This was a bill that was passed in 2020 through this committee. And then for product that is over 5 milliliters or is a single use, I'm sorry, over 5 liters, and devices for vaping as well as single use devices, they are taxed at 12%. From what I can gather without actually being on the ground in the hearings and seeing how this legislation kind of panned out, that appeared to be a compromise that was struck, as the original bill called for an 80% tax across the board for electronic cigarettes. So this piece of to provide a little bit more parity between the less than 5 milliliter liquid, as well as especially the single-use devices, as well as the devices themselves, and set that rate at 30%, which is kind of a medium in the middle kind of number. We do know that from vaping that we have about 4 years more data now than we had before, which would have been presented in this hearing, to talk about kind of the effects not only of vaping on individuals, including this what's called lung injury that they are now documenting more and more cases of, but we also have secondhand delivery, which is also causing lung injury in people. And so we have a little bit more data than we had before. And with that, Madam Chair, I'll gladly turn over for any questions if you feel.
Thank you. Thank you. Delegate Vogel.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm looking through this bill now. Does this include, is there anything on here about cannabis vaporizers?
There is not. This bill dealt nothing with cannabis at all. I did get that clarified. I had somebody else ask me that question. I went and just double checked myself. Then it does not cover cannabis.
Okay, so these are just standard
Nicotine
vape pens.
So they're vape devices. So to that end, you could technically buy a device by itself and then insert a cannabis cartridge. And so the device itself would be taxed at 30%. And then the cartridge, obviously, the cannabis has a completely different system that I'm not familiar with.
Okay, understood. Thank you.
Thank you.
Delegate Young.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And to Delegate Fair, thank you for your follow-up on that piece. I do want to just put on the record to Delegate Vogel's question. that I do think that that's something we might want to consider looking at. I know this bill is specifically focused on tobacco, but certainly I think that that would, it just makes sense to me. And I think that they're very analogous in the sense of how they're used and certainly how they could be taxed. Thank you.
Thank you. Delegate Vogel.
Sorry, just quickly, since Delegate Young brought that up, I do have very serious concerns around especially high concentration THC cartridges and the potential harm that they're causing. And I don't know if the goal is to move this bill now, but maybe it's a different bill down the line. But I do think we should look at potentially setting more stringent regulations and taxes on especially those highest concentration THC cartridges.
Okay, thank you. Delegate Polakovich-Carr.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Delegate Fair, for being here. So sorry, I just want to make sure I understand kind of the scope of what's included as before us in your bill. So it's the devices. I seem to remember from that 2020 bill, because I don't vape, so again, trying to remember exactly what's out there in this industry. That there's like refillable liquid. Is like, are we going for like the whole scope here? Is that accurate to say that it's kind of like all the different vaping ways that somebody could choose to vape, that all the different products would be encompassed under this, or are under the higher tax threshold already?
Yeah, so except for the case of vaping liquid containers that contain 5 milliliters or less, those are currently taxed at 60%. We did not touch that or change that in any way. We're simply, this bill poses the idea that we raise from 12% to 30% every other mechanism for vaping tobacco-based products, or nicotine-based products, I should say.
Thank you for that clarification.
And just to clarify, Delegate Fair, just looking at the bill, I also see a 12% tax for tobacco pipes. Is that just making the distinction and keeping tobacco pipes at the same level, whereas the electronic devices are increasing? Is that?
Yeah, we had a brief discussion over this. This is actually loose leaf tobacco that goes into tobacco pipes. It makes up less than 0.1% of tobacco users, and so we just looked at it and thought there's not a dire public health desire to really kind of curb that behavior when it's such a tiny population of people that utilize that resource for smoking.
Okay. All right, any other questions or discussion at this point? All right, seeing none, thank you all for taking the time to ask questions and share some thoughts. We will be, regrouping on the revenues measures that we've been discussing. So if you have any other thoughts, questions, concerns, please don't hesitate to reach out. And we will probably be meeting again tomorrow. If not tomorrow, definitely Thursday. So stay tuned